Hello there and happy Sunday. I wanted to come on here and do a Lenten reflection. We had said that we would do some Lenten reflections during Lent. So we haven't really talked about Lent. If you want a good deep dive on what Lent is, you should go back to one of our original episodes and one of our still our most popular, most downloaded episode, which is on Lent. And again, way back in the beginning, so just scroll back all the way. That one is such a good deep dive on what the Lenten season is supposed to be, what it's supposed to do for us as Christians, and just a really good perspective on kind of how to approach it, how to celebrate Lent. So again, go listen to that if you haven't. Today, I'm just going to kind of provide a Lenten reflection. And I started this recording, in all honesty, one other time, and I got too long-winded and like all over the place on this, so I'm going to be brief here. Since we haven't talked about Lent, for anyone who is new to it, or this is your first time kind of celebrating it, or maybe you're just curious, there's 3 pillars of Lent: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And it's supposed to be not, there's a misconception, I think, from those that don't celebrate Lent, and also probably from some that do and just don't understand it, the reasoning behind it that well, that it's, just a time of suffering, and why would you do that? God didn't ask us to do that specifically. It doesn't say that in the Bible, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really not supposed to be just a season of suffering. If you're fasting from something, maybe there's some quote unquote sufferings there, but it's supposed to be a season of preparation for Easter. And yes, it does involve more prayer, more fasting, more almsgiving in an effort to weed out. I saw something really good this week that was a nice visual and a nice little anecdote about Lent, where it says, "I'm tending the garden of my soul." So by adding in more prayer in whatever way you may do that's planting the good seeds. By fasting, maybe you're pulling some weeds somewhere. And then by almsgiving. So I really liked that picture of Lent, because everybody needs a good pruning, a good springtime pruning, and prepare our hearts for a really fruitful celebration of Easter. So that's just a little about my perspective on Lent. And if you guys remember, I didn't grow up celebrating Lent. Just, it's not like it was condemned in our church or anything, but it just was not something that the Baptist church typically celebrates. But this is, I guess, even before Brian and I were together, I kind of practiced Lent here and there, just because I thought the idea of some self-discipline in the spiritual life is probably not a bad one. But I guess Brian and I have been celebrating Lents together for about 8 years now. And in the past, the preparation for Lent, I have taken that so seriously, trying to think of, okay, what do I want to give up? What's something that is, I guess, attainable, but also a good stretch for me? What's something that is going to require discipline? And when I mess up, it's going to remind me I'm human, and focus that. For me, every time I crave whatever I'm giving up, my thoughts go to Jesus and his suffering on the cross, and his discipline in his fast in the desert, which is obviously where our description of fasting for 40 days comes from, is Jesus' fast in the desert from the Bible. So I have always taken the preparation for Lent very seriously. I don't just kind of throw around like, well, I'm going to give up cookies or something easy, or something, which cookies would not be easy for me, but you know what I mean? Like, I try to really think about something that's going to be fruitful, as well as, what are we adding in? That was one of the things that I didn't know before I started practicing Lent with Brian, and probably hearing some homilies about it and everything, that an equal part of Lent is not just fasting, but prayer. And again, almsgiving, which I'll talk more about almsgiving in a little bit. But so Brian and I have always tried to add in a little prayer. Sometimes it's been separately, each of us, but a lot of times what we've done, because we did this probably 3 years ago for the first time, and we liked it so much that we tried to kind of institute that every year, which is where we do a prayer together every day. Now, Brian and I pray together whenever there's some kind of concern or a praise or something. Usually it's something specific. We pray over our trips. If we're going somewhere, we try to do that in the car. That's something my family always did whenever we would go on vacation. So we pray together. But doing a daily prayer is not something that we're always in the practice of doing, like having just a sit down intentional time. And so we started doing a prayer together before bed. And we loved it. And like I said, we've tried to reinstitute that every year for Lent, is let's carve out that time. So all of that to say that we have always prepared a lot for Lent. And honestly, we've always been pretty steadfast about whatever we have, we say we're going to give up, add in, all those things. We take it very seriously. And I'm setting the stage here if you aren't following me here yet, that this year has been a little different. And not that we haven't taken it, just I think the season kind of snuck up on us. We're having to give ourselves a lot of grace through this season of Lent, because honestly, I at least haven't been as steadfast as I usually am. Because honestly, I didn't even really spend as much time preparing for Lent. And I struggled to figure out what I wanted to give up. And I want to talk about that for a second, because I think I had kind of a good realization that might be helpful for some. I was trying to think of what I'm going to give up for Lent. And frankly, I'm not one of those people that just year to year does the same thing. I like to change it up. And so, I was trying to figure out what I was going to give up. And last year for Lent, Brian gave up processed foods. Now, I ate a lot cleaner as well. I mean, if only for the fact that we live under the same roof and have the same groceries here. But I didn't go that all in. But he gave up all processed foods. So we're talking cheese, rice, pasta, bread, obviously canned things. But, And he lost a lot of weight. He was very steadfast throughout. It was a good experience. I think it really did. I'm sure there were lots of times where he had to kind of figure out, he had to plan his meal a little differently than we were planning ours. And that took a lot of discipline. And I think those are the things that can remind us how human we are. Because we also fail at it too, right? And, so anyways, it was a good practice for him, and I found myself thinking before Ash Wednesday this year that, maybe that's what I'm going to do. And so Brian was like, whew, okay, yeah, I can be on board for that. We can do that. And then the more I thought about it, and I'm sure it was also some of these accounts that I follow that have been so good about kind of redirecting my focus onto what it's supposed to be. But I started to feel like, you know what, maybe that's not what I should do, because I feel like I am treating this a little bit like a Catholic New Year. Like, this is my New Year resolution, and this is for self-improvement. I think that's the thing. I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw something that was like, Lent is not supposed to be about self-improvement. Obviously not that self-improvement is bad. It's very good. And a lot of times I think that through seasons of Lent and those kinds of practices, we probably do see a lot of self-improvement. But it's not the focus of Lent. And the more I thought about it, prayed about it, I just felt like taking that route was going to be about the number I saw on the scale, and if I was meeting those goals that I had in my mind at the time, which again, those are still good goals. I still want to do that, but I didn't want to tie that all up for Lent. It wasn't the correct focus. And in looking up kind of what the church has to say about Lent, I just use the term self-improvement. Lent is not supposed to be about self-improvement. The church says Lent is supposed to be about self-denial. So denying yourself something in an effort to, again, weed out the bad. Or, it doesn't all have to be like a bad habit that you're weeding out. Sometimes it's just something that you could use less of, or just maybe you're looking for kind of that like spiritual discipline component. And that's what you're going to be building out at during the Lenten season. And I think that it can change year to year for where you're at in your spiritual walk and what you might need. So I think that, while I didn't spend a lot of time figuring out what I was going to give up for Lent, I think that realization was enough for me to kind of refocus and honestly prune something spiritually that needed to be pruned. I don't know if you want to call it vanity or whatever. And again, not that self-improvement is bad, but it's just not supposed to be the point of Lent. So anyways, that was a long-winded explanation about where about preparing for Lent, where I'm at now. But in short, what we gave up, so let's see, Brian gave up Dr. Pepper's. That's something that he always kind of gives up, something that he feels needs to be pruned by that time of the year probably. And I gave up sweets, again, for sure something I need to give up more often probably. But really something that was going to be something achievable for me this Lenten season, but also difficult and require discipline and kind of allow me to turn my focus to Jesus in the way that I want this Lent to go. So, in the way that I hope God wants this Lent to go, that's what the goal is, right? And so that's what we gave up. But one of the things that we have added in that I thought was really interesting, a really good perspective that Brian shared, he was like, one of the things I want, well, I guess you could say give up and / add in, or maybe you file this under almsgiving. I think that's probably more accurate. So you think of almsgiving and you think of like giving more to the poor or giving more to being generous, right? And that's definitely part of the definition. But I think where we miss, or we can miss that component sometimes, is that it can be practicing generosity in other ways too. Like Brian was like, I want to judge people less. Whenever Brian and I, we are so opinionated, like everybody, I assume, but we will go on about, whatever somebody's doing. And is it probably sometimes gossip? Yes, and that obviously should be weeded out. But more so than that, we're always like, well, here's what we would do. Even if we don't, necessarily disapprove of what they're doing, we just put ourselves in their shoes and say and discuss, what we would do. And he was like, I feel like that's become a way that I'm judging people. I'm going to give that up. And I think that you can file that under probably all three pillars of Lent, but especially the almsgiving, just being more generous and compassionate towards people. It doesn't have to be a monetary donation, although it can be. Maybe that's the goal that you have. Again, this is like all about self-reflection and looking internally, spiritually on what needs to be watered and what needs to be weeded in our spiritual life. And I just thought that was such a good thought to have about, that's what I'm going to weed out this Lent, and I'm going to be more generous with people, and a really good thought to have. So I hope that's helpful for someone. I am having to give ourselves more grace this Lenten season because, like I mentioned earlier, we usually introduce a prayer together every day. And I don't know that we've even done it once. We said, like, yeah, we want to do that because we do enjoy it. And if y'all have listened to any of our recent episodes, you know that right now, like, our bedtime routine is just a lot. And so we forget. But I'm giving ourselves grace because the one thing that I've realized, in reflecting probably last week sometime, I was like, man, we haven't even done that once. And then I started to realize and give myself some grace because one of the things that we have worked on, and this is one of those deals where I think your seasons morph a little bit. Maybe Brian and I aren't praying just one-on-one together, and I would still like to do that. Maybe it's something we can accomplish this week. But we have incorporated a lot of bedtime prayer, and it takes a lot of prayer for me and Brian to get through our routine, so that's good. But in all reality, we have incorporated a lot of prayer with our boys. So we do a couple of recited prayers before bedtime, and then also try to say one, from the heart, if you will. I mean, a recited prayer can be from the heart as well, but off the cuff, I don't know how you want to say it, but just our own prayer, so that the boys are really comfortable just talking to God, whether it be through a recited prayer or just saying what's on their mind. And that's been, like, they took to that so easily. And so we've been doing that for a while. So in a way, we are doing that. And I'm trying to say, you know what, maybe Brian and I aren't always every day this Lent going to get our, remember to do our prayer together, but we are doing that with the boys. And that's something that we can kind of double down on and continue to build. And I don't think that's a bad thing either, because sometimes I think where we, maybe we're approaching I'm going to continue with this anecdote of Lent and the garden, and our souls being the garden. Maybe you approach the garden thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to need these tools and I'm going to accomplish this. And then once you get your hands dirty, you realize that something else needed pruning or something else needed moving or tending in a different way. And that's kind of, I guess, that's really the point of this whole reflection today, and what I wanted to come on here and say. If your Lent has not started out the way that you thought that it would, and here we are looking down, we're 2 weeks in, we're starting our third week of Lent, and you're like, okay, well, that didn't go as planned. Don't quit. Reevaluate your tools and tend what needs to be tended. Root out what needs to be rooted out. Maybe it's different than what you thought it was going to be in the beginning, but you alongside God realize something else should be your priority. That's where the growth is. I think God honors those efforts. So all that to say, if this Lenten season hasn't started out or gone the way that you thought, and maybe you've indulged in the things you're trying to fast from, or you haven't gotten to your prayer like I have, or you haven't even thought about giving generously or some kind of almsgiving that wasn't even on your radar. Don't worry about it. Give yourself some grace and reevaluate, and just make sure that you're not plowing ahead the way that you thought it should be tended. Listen to what God may be telling you to tend, and how He may be telling you to tend the garden of your soul for the most fruit. Okay. I think I did pretty well here. I'm going to end on a question, and I'll post it on our social media. Have y'all ever heard of the Sunday indulgence during Lent? So like if you're giving up, like we are, sweets or Dr. Peppers, that on Sunday you can indulge in those? I'm curious. I hadn't until just a few seasons ago, and now it's kind of become something that we do, not with everything, not every time, but for something like sweets, like I'm probably going to have a chocolate chip cookie today. And I did, before I got on here, I did the old Google search to see what it said, because this morning I said something about that to June's CCE teacher, and she looked at me like I was crazy. And then I was like second guessing myself. Did I make that up, or did whoever told me that, did they make it up? The old Google says that that's true. And here's the thing, though. Lent isn't something that the church, it's not like obligation. It's something that you're voluntarily giving up. There are no rules. There's structure, I think, for how it's supposed to go, if you will, but there's no rules to this. It's all about tending your own garden alongside God and what he would have, how he would have you go about it. So again, I'm curious. I'll ask you guys over on our social media, and hope you have a great third week of Lent, and that it is a particularly fruitful week for you and a fruitful Lenten season. So I will be back with you guys for another Lenten reflection next week.